When I want to grab my phone and record myself and talk to the camera, I'm like, what can I say? What am I gonna talk about?
In a very strange way, although it feels so scary, we end up resorting back to all of these habits we have in life, which are saying what we think people want to hear. And then you ultimately just end up feeling like shit and can't find your authentic voice because you probably never used it in real life anyway.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm kind of wishing that I kept up with my Spanish right now because I used to be very, very, very good at it, and now
Really?
I'm not great anymore. Yeah, I took it for like 9 years or something, and I was really
Wow.
good.
So, welcome. I was introducing you, and I was telling people that you're an authenticity coach, an authenticity strategist. How did you come about being an authenticity strategist? What's going on with that? Nobody else is doing that. So, why you?
Well, I'll start where I am and then just like quickly kind of get you to how I got here. So I call myself an authenticity strategist because not because I think that authenticity looks like one thing and we all need to conform to it, but I think that authenticity is this practice kind of like yoga. And there's lots of yoga teachers, right? And they're all not looking for you to look the exact same, but they want to give you this experience of being on the mat and doing the thing and being inside of that present moment. So I like to help people find what that flow state feels like to be themselves as a practice that then they continue to work on after we're done working with each other. And the unique intersection that kind of brought me to this point, and I started this journey really long before I knew it was going to happen, is I was a photographer first, and I was helping people feel really comfortable on camera. I always just established these really beautiful relationships built on these like extreme bedrocks of trust with my clients, and making people feel comfortable in front of the camera ended up being sort of like my superpower. I was a good photographer, I lighting, angles, all that, but making somebody feel really at home in their own body was sort of the gift. And then flash forward 4-ish years since I started the company, I booked Tina the Tina Turner musical on Broadway. And while I was doing that show, the pandemic hit, and during the pandemic I had this like reckoning of like, who am I, what am I doing, talk about a second act, right? And for the world. And I jumped on TikTok once we resumed performances, and I wasn't even quite sure what I was doing with it yet. And I found myself talking about a lot of things like entrepreneurship, personal branding, leveraging just being yourself to make money, whatever that meant. Because I think during the pandemic, people had so many like questions about, what do I do for money? Do I even like what I do
Yeah.
for work? And I then sort of realized that everything I was talking about, being myself, being the reason that I make clients feel comfortable in front of the camera, making clients feel comfortable in front of the camera, being why I was successful, I was like, oh, my business is successful ultimately just because of who I am as a person. So if I could help more people get in touch with who they are as a person, they could probably then leverage those skills to build a successful business. I then realized that content creation was this tool that helped me to continue to refine who I was and what I was learning about myself. I kind of smooshed it all together and continued to find the message through creating content. And thus, this whole thing was born. And people started seeking me out to work with me one on one. And it really just grew from there very, very quickly.
That's so interesting, and you could be one of our friends because we've all been there. And just let me say what you just said.
Yeah. We were there during the pandemic too.
I can't believe, I mean, I can believe because I like to believe that if we work hard and you're stubborn about the pursuit of your goals, then you can get what you want. Like, I do believe that we all have, there's privilege, of course, but we have equal opportunity to achieve what we want. But the work is hard. And the longer I do this, the more I realize that, like, no one was kidding. The work is really hard. And I actually think sometimes people don't even say how hard it is. And it's not even that the work is hard, it's that you don't really know how long it's going to take. And I thought this would it's all happened very quickly now that I kind of look at the big picture, but I thought it would happen even faster. I don't know who the fuck I thought I was. I was just like, this is going to just click and be done and happen. And it's a grind. I'm loving the journey, but it's a grind. And so it is very cool that it's happened. I really feel like we're on the verge of like whatever that next level is, moving into corporate a bit more, still on TikTok, of course, but also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, the newsletter. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, in addition to the other full-time jobs, you know? So it's like
Exactly.
it's like I still do headshots and I still audition, although I'm not rushing into another theater project until it's really correct. As you know, we all know, it's like luck eventually you achieve some sort of. I think we can always be a little picky. I think that that's this weird narrative in the performing world of like it's such a privilege to get a job, and like it is, but also you're a human who has worth. You can be picky. So it's like I'm still performing, I still do headshots, I still create content full time, and I do the consulting and coaching. And so in the last 48 hours, I think I sold like 9 one-on-ones. And so it's like,
Wow.
which is wonderful for like the bank account, but then my brain is like melting out of my ears. And so it's this really fine balance of taking care of my people and taking care of myself. And I find I'm less great at the second one, but 2024 goals.
I was talking to Alan, and I was telling him that for me it's been a really big struggle to find my own voice in social media, like talking specific in social media. Like I know I'm an artist just like you, so yeah, when I'm singing, okay, that's easy, or when I'm doing a choreography, that's easy, but I'm sure that I'm more than that. It's not just dancing and singing. But when I want to grab my phone and record myself and talk to the camera, I'm like, what can I say? What am I gonna talk about? And like, what's my authentic voice? So how do you find that?
I think it's interesting specifically for folks like us who are used to performing. We're used to performing as characters or within roles, right? Also with singing and dancing, there's this extra layer to the expression because we sing and we dance because words are no longer enough, right? We have to break
Yeah,
into song.
yeah,
That's the conceit of musical theater. Fine. And we love it.
yeah.
We're all here for it. I'm obsessed with it. However, that is not real life. And the interesting thing about doing that, if you're singing or dancing, you're probably on a stage doing a live performance in front of people. And in an odd way, there's almost a level of anonymity to it because largely you can't really see the people. Of course, you can make out faces and the people are on their stupid cell phones and you can see them. But
Yeah.
there is this layer of removal between you and the audience, even though you're so deeply connected. So it's like, I don't know how you feel, but when I feel on stage, I feel very safe. I feel very, I'm so locked in with the other person I'm with on stage, although I'm so deeply connected to the people I'm with that I just feel very centered and very safe.
Yeah,
In an,
absolutely.
in an odd way, when you're home in your living room by yourself and you open your phone, you feel really isolated and almost, even though it's a smaller experience, it feels much more vacuous and almost like you're in deep space alone or out on the ocean by yourself with no one around you. And all of a sudden, there's no structure, there's no lines, there's no pod bray, kick your face. It's just you. And it's really, really revealed. And then the weirdest part is you can see yourself while you're doing it. And I think, especially for us, but also for a lot of normal folks, although Zoom has been an awesome tool for practicing, I believe, it's been by necessity, but we are not used to seeing ourselves while we be ourselves. And I think that really throws people for a loop because their critical eye steps in and starts to play director. So you can't possibly engage or be in a flow state. You just can't because you're editing while you're being. And even the best writers will tell you, and this is one of my tips for later, it's that you got to put the shitty version out there first. You cannot be filtering, you can't be editing as you speak. The frightening part being that's what we do in life. So, in a very strange way, although it feels so scary, we end up resorting back to all of these habits we have in life, which are saying what we think people want to hear, code switching and using language that we think is appropriate for certain situations, stepping on eggshells to avoid offending other people. And then you ultimately just end up feeling like shit and can't find your authentic voice because you probably never used it in real life anyway. So it sort of then it illuminates this gap that you've experienced in your life always, but now it's so glaring because now you want to achieve, you want to create a product, a piece of content, tell a story, and you can't. You literally can't find your voice because you've never had it.
Oh,
Oh my God. I think this conversation had like 20 layers to it.
yeah.
I've never done that particular version of the math. And so I'm grateful that we're recording as well so that I can watch this back later and understand that's one more way we can tell this story, but only because Vince asked the question in the way that he did. And I know what both of your backgrounds are. I can answer it specifically. And that opens up something for me too. So these conversations are so important for so many reasons.
Justin, this is very important right now because what we're seeing is this creator economy booming, and that we all know someone who became an influencer or that has some brand deals or that has found success through social media. And it's becoming more and more and more. Everyone has a podcast, everyone has a YouTube channel, everyone has a TikTok, and we're all wanting to get money out of it. So we're all jumping on it. And I do believe that just by the way the algorithms work and the new platforms work, it's turning more into a video thing and a personal video thing. When I do consulting for brands, if they don't have a brand ambassador or someone who can be on camera, I strongly recommend that because I'm like, it's not gonna work. You're not gonna be successful on YouTube or on TikTok or on maybe on YouTube, but not on TikTok or on Reels. So I think that's why more and more people are starting to create content, and we all struggle with that. So what you just told Vince was really really amazing for me. It opened a lot of mind blowing things in my mind. But once you start uh, recording or trying to, I know we're gonna fuck up because you said we have to bring the shitty version first. Okay, I'm open for that. But what do we tell people who we're actors and it's probably easier for us, even though it's hard, and we're into communication and we've posted things and all that stuff. But some people are doctors or architects or whatever, and they're like, what do I do with this phone or with this thing? So if you want to step your toes into content creation or are willing to be vulnerable in this way, what would be a great tip to begin with in terms of authenticity and when how you can relax and trust this process?
Yeah. Well, first I have to say this is giving me an idea of like, why don't I post my content translated into Spanish? Because I'm like, this would be, I'm like, it's
Totally.
like,
Like let's do that. We should do that.
Absolutely.
since global domination is the plan anyway, I was like, we should do it. Todos al mundo. I was like, we should do this immediately. I think I would say, I said this yesterday to a client, and I was like, I think this is more important than I mentioned. Performing yourself, I think, in the connotation in the regular world has this connotation of falseness. And I think again, as actors, you can understand what I'm saying. It's not. And I'm doing it right now. I am performing myself. This is absolutely who I am in my content. It's absolutely who I am in life. But like, it's Saturday morning. Like, I'm thrilled to be here with you, but it's Saturday morning. I would be in my robe still. I would be like on the couch. I would be like a little potato because the week was very long.
Yeah.
But when I do an interview or something, I'm here. It's performing yourself is just an activated version of you, right? Like when an athlete is on the field, a football player, and they are in the thing and they are doing the thing, an athlete performs. But I think that we have this concept in the world that, oh, she was just like performing all night, as if it's this like over the top falseness. And I think that it's a careful distinction that needs to be made between performing and performative. This idea of like this larger than life, extended broad version of ourselves that's ultimately another form of people pleasing and hiding in plain sight, being this larger than yourself version. So that when you start to put yourself on camera, I promise you, especially the first first stretch of it, it will feel weird. It's going to feel weird. Just because it feels weird doesn't mean you are necessarily being false. you just might not used to be you might not use you just might not be used to turning it on, right? And turning it on isn't fake. It's just an activation of self you're not used to using that we are, right? It's that thing of like, it's a Thursday. I feel like shit, but I have an audition and I gotta go. I can't not whatever. So you shower, you warm up, you do your hair, you do the thing, and then you're standing outside the room, and then you go in. I'm sure assuming this is how auditions look, everywhere. And all of a sudden, you're there, you're doing it. Like the magic happens. You probably sound great, and it's done. And we are just used to knowing how to turn it on. And then ideally, it's not a fake version of self. Real people can do that too. And I just hope to illuminate for certain people that when you are being yourself purposefully and creating a content piece, although it might initially in the beginning stages feel like you're putting on a show, you're just, and this is counter to what I said to Vince before, because that's when you're really first starting to try and find your voice. But once you're starting to do it, you just might not used to being a version of yourself that you're deciding. It's like really learning how to walk again, but it's a version of performing yourself, which I do not think is wrong or false. And that's one of the biggest things that's hard for people to wrap their mind around, especially if you have no real knowing or consciousness of it prior. That's like a very heady answer, but I do believe
No, no, no. We love heady answers over here. We're very into that.
Let me ask something. Is this like when I'm with Alan, I'm a version of myself. When I'm with my girlfriend, I'm another version of myself. It's a true version of myself, but it's kind of different. Is that what you're saying? Like something like that?
Yeah, you
Okay.
know what I sometimes picture? I picture like a big, in a recording studio, the person who's producing, they're sitting behind the huge soundboard with all those we are that. And we are our own producer and director. And so when you're with Alan, you might dial up silly more than you normally would, right? And then when
I
you're with
love
your
that
girlfriend,
in
right,
the
you might
mixing.
be, yes, we're just kind of mixing at all times. And my goal for my clients and my goal for people in general is that we don't think of that as manipulative. We think of it as having access and control over who we be at any given moment. So much so that eventually it just becomes habitual. We can do it in our sleep. And that we're aware that in a job interview, on a first date, at a family reunion, in higher stakes situations, we can still be who we want to be, because that's how I define confidence. I don't think confidence is this like, it's like that dick that walks into the room and thinks he's better than everybody. It's the person who can walk into any room and still be themselves.
Love that.
It's at the end of this, it's so funny. I would love to hear what you said in Spanish and then like put it through a translator, because sometimes I find that
I'm
as
scared.
no, I think it's actually interesting because it's helpful for me to hear how people hear what I say in English. But then to then take it one more layer and put it into Spanish is fascinating, because in a great way the message gets actually like distilled a bit more. And I have a terrible, I'm not awesome at, I'm good at simplifying complex concepts, but when they first come out of my mouth, I think I explain them much more simply than I do, because they exist in my head. I know exactly what I'm saying. So it would be fascinating for me to then go back into the Spanish and translate it back into English and be like, oh, that's actually a really easy way to kind of explain and get at it. So that's just an interesting sort of
Yeah,
experiment I'm thinking of while
I'm
we're
sure
doing this.
that'd be fun.
But then it's the same. Like when you have this all this information in your head and you want to say it for the first time, it takes time and it's difficult to put the words. I think it's just the same as finding your authentic self. When it's the first time you're trying to put it out there, it's difficult. And then when you start practicing, it's gonna feel more easy or more connected to yourself, no?
I think that that's a great way of putting it. I think another way of sort of looking at it is, people, the question I get asked all the time is, I'm so afraid to start, like, but what do I do? And I'm just like, you just have to do it. Like, I wish there was a better answer, but because, and you need to do it unencumbered by a niche or like by a box, in my opinion, because until you start posting, until you start saying those things for the first time, you might not realize that Vince starts creating content and wants to talk about performing, and realizes when he starts to talk about the life of a performer, he's like, oh, I actually don't really, I do not enjoy talking about this. Like, it's just, I live this so much that I don't want to create content about this. You would never have known that you have no real desire to tell those stories until you told those stories. So then you have that knowledge. You're like, cool, I still love it. That's a huge part of my identity. Right now, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about why I started a podcast and why I really believe in expanding my brand. And right, like, you don't know what you don't enjoy or do enjoy sharing and talking about until you try a lot of different things. It's like going to a buffet with cuisine from all over the world and being like, I love Indian food. I had no idea, right? And I'm not as big of a fan of American food. I'll throw us under the bus because why not? You have to try things, and it is like finding your voice, less because you're looking for the right words, because I promise you, you're not going to have them anyway, but more because you want to see if you're even in the right book. You know, are you even in the right section of the library?
Yeah. and and how do you know if you're right? You feel it, or it's about the ¿cómo se dice retroalimentación? The feedback that people gives to you, like, or both. It's how do you feel and the feedback, or it's more important how do you feel?
It is significantly more important how you feel. I think when we start talking about feedback and metrics, we're starting to talk about strategy, which is valid, so valid. But I think that if you start this journey and allow yourself to be majorly influenced by the metrics, you will inherently begin creating for the metrics, for the algorithm, for your audience, at which point you are just in one more place creating a version of yourself that relies on feedback, that relies on the responses you get from the people, the things, the noise around you. And what are you doing? You are then just cementing your habits of people pleasing in one more place. Congratulations, you know?
That we're really mind blown in thinking about all the ways and times we've been not ourselves by trying to please people, and that this is a much deeper conversation because of that. Because we're actually thinking about, like, how much of yourself are you allowing yourself to be in general in life.
That didn't leave it out of the story, but I couldn't give my entire life story. I really feel like until 2 years ago, I lived so much of my life like this, and that's evident in many different areas of my life. I was in a relationship that ended last year, and I was talking with my therapist yesterday about I forgot that I felt this, but for 3 years while I was with him, I was terrified of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing because I thought he'd leave. LOL, what does he end up doing? But like, I was petrified because I was certain, because I'd had it confirmed for me in other parts of my life up to that point, I was too much. I was difficult. I was hard to be with. And so I tried to be as amenable, as easy as possible, and became someone I didn't really recognize, became this sort of like very weird, bland, vanilla version of myself who couldn't say when I was frustrated by things or couldn't tell when I was upset by things because I was just afraid. And it wasn't until I was like, I'm no longer I don't feel the support, which I probably hadn't felt for a while, to be honest. And then I started choosing myself a little bit more. And the craziest thing was how fast, once I started choosing me, that our divide grew, which was fascinating. And also that my journey, like, it was like I lit a match and the whole fire went ablaze. I started to choose myself, and I got my TEDx talk. My TikTok grew so fast. All of a sudden, people wanted to work with me. It happened so quickly. All I had to do was sort of like shift the spotlight back to myself a little bit. I didn't realize how little movement it ultimately would take to create such a catalytic response. And maybe that's helpful for people out there, because it does feel so major, profound, mind-blowing. Sure, the steps are very little, though. Starting to choose yourself takes almost no effort. It just scares the shit out of us until you do it, and you're like, oh, I just had to say no to going to a party that I just didn't really want to go to. That's it. That's like all you have to start doing, you know?
I mean, even in that relationship, that's not a relationship you want to be in, right?
But in that moment,
in that moment, I wanted to.
But when you start choosing yourself, if people start you know, going away or whatever, or that job is not compatible with you anymore or whatever, that's probably a good thing. Disguised as a bad thing in the moment, but
Yeah.
you'll eventually line up with things that are more in your authentic self era or whatever.
Trust that it is that trust that it will eventually sort of fall into alignment, and it's relying on the knowledge that you will eventually experience a feeling you've never felt before. And that's really hard for people to take that leap, because I was so deeply in love, and when the breakup happened, I was devastated, even though, and because I didn't see everything that I'm saying now at all, until months and months and months went by, and I had friends reflect things back on me, and I went back through things, and I was like, oh, that probably wasn't great, or that moment wasn't. So you're so right. It's just, this is why it's hard to get started, because once you've kind of experienced a little bit of the shift, you know how good it starts to feel. But those very first steps are taking this leap of faith.
So, my next question would be.
You're next and last because we're
Sorry. Well,
Do it.
I'm thinking about the algorithm. So one thing is finding your authentic self and your voice and putting yourself out there. But what about the algorithm? Do you have to work together? Like, okay, I have to find myself, but at the same time, I have to put out there 5 videos and 2 reels and 16 stories a day. And, like, do you have to think about all that too? Or by finding your voice and by being authentic, it's all you need?
It's a yes and no but, because you have to focus on the storytelling and just allowing yourself to make the shitty stuff first. There's so much language out there about posting all this. What they're really saying, without saying it, is like, you're playing the lottery and you're just buying more lottery tickets. So yes,
Okay.
your odds increase the more lottery tickets you buy, but also you're going to spend a lot of money on lottery tickets, or in this case, you're going to spend a lot of time and energy on creating content. I would instead, in the beginning of your journey, just focus on creating what you can sustainably. I like to say, create consistently, not obsessively. And then I think as you go and you start to be comfortable, if you think about, I want to create a little bit more content, use it as opportunities to find what you like to talk about. And it's just more chances to test and to see, as opposed to like, let me try and recreate this lightning in a bottle. I will tell you that 2+ years into the journey, I am now focusing on strategy more than I ever have. But I really didn't get to 277,000 followers on TikTok by focusing on strategy. I did
Okay.
it by doing what you're talking about. I do not think that is the situation that everybody finds themselves in, but I really caution people thinking that they, from day one, need to post 5 TikToks, 2 reels, and all. You will burn out so fast, and you will start to resent the process, and that will limit your growth permanently, because you'll just stop doing it, and that will just hurt you. So it is a collaboration, but don't give it all of the power, the algorithm.
Even if you don't realize it now, maybe you do know it, but you're sort of a guru and you're channeling stuff, and I love that, and we can talk about that all day long. And I think I want to thank you for being here. I think we're gonna have a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up questions from our audience, from us. I think that we can do like an experiment. Let's leave it like this, and let's see in a few months if we keep creating more content, what comes up, and maybe we'll do a follow-up in a few months with questions from our audience and from us, of course. But thank you so much. This has been so enlightening, and every time I talk to you, it's like this crazy session of knowledge and philosophy all in one. And thank you so much. What you're doing is really important
And inspiring.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. It's I love these spaces. They allow me to do some of that unfolding as well. Like, I'm very grateful to get these opportunities too. And I find that in conversation, we can make so much progress with each other. And so happy, I would return at any point. And if people say that they want the content in Spanish, I'm just saying,
Let's get it.
I'm
Let's
like
get it to
trying
them.
to figure this out ASAP, so we can make it happen.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Justin.